He's just on his way in for Rimby.
Wasn't he on there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I am. Hello, all.
Hello there. We are live and online, everyone. Welcome to the committee meeting of the whole for June 1st. It is 5 p.m. and I'll call the meeting to order. For those of you joining us at home, online we have our legislative coordinator, Mr. Ross Pettibone, and Councillor Ruben Connick is in transit on his way over the next half hour or so, so he's joining us electronically as well. Welcome, Councillor Connick.
Oh, welcome. Hello.
Very good. Your reception is okay?
Yeah, you can hear me all right?
Very well.
Good.
Everybody had an opportunity to review the agenda. Councillor Hibbs?
Sure. I'll move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. I thought you motioned.
No.
Very good. Well, good cue anyway. And then the presentations are first up.
Should be the presentation.
I'm sorry, reports rather. Director Duke is not with us as yet. Will she be joining us shortly?
She will be joining us right now.
She's
Very
here.
good.
She stepped out.
Maybe just, usually 1 minute, but while we're waiting, we have started the review of council's committees, agencies, and boards that was directed in your strategic plan. It was medium priority item. We've targeted for 2019 actually, so we're a little behind in delivering this one. We do have a standardized format developed. I would say the overarching theme that we've been taking when we're looking at this review is looking at areas where we might be able to continue the good work that some of these external boards, agencies, and committees have been doing, but with less burden on council directly. So in some cases, that may be changing the format of that interaction or trading the council involvement for some additional administrative support. But where possible, that's what our goal has been, is to lower the time and resource burden on council directly, as there is only 7 members, and try and shift that either to the volunteer board itself or to administration where possible. So with that, Director Duke has joined us, and I'm sure it's ready to move us through.
Thank you. Director Duke, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Before committee tonight is the first of a series of committee review reports that administration will be presenting in 2020 to fulfill Council's strategic goal 4.1.1 for open and accessible government. Item C is to conduct a review of council committees. And we will also be presenting a number of other goals and measurables of the plan in the course of it. The cover report to committee tonight outlines the scope of the review project, and the administrative project charter is also attached for your reference. Administration will be reviewing individual agencies, ideally in groups of 3, including the agency's purpose, structure, and history, the time commitments involved, and current city resourcing, including council appointments, budget, administrative supports, and other contributions that are made. Just for council's reference and for the public, stakeholder input primarily from committee members in this case. It will be consulted in each case for input on the agency's current functioning. Each review will include administrative recommendations for amendments to the city-agency relationship for council's consideration at a future meeting if a resolution is needed. Tonight we'll be asking you to indicate, if you would please, with the thumbs up, thumbs down method, whether or not any of the recommendations in the report are something that you'd like to see brought back, or if there are other ones, perhaps mention those and we can make a note and see to it that they're developed. So amendments requiring a council resolution will be returned as soon as possible to a council meeting following the review so that the review itself is fresh in your memories. And during the course of the review, administration will be creating templates and standards that can assist with managing committees and amendments going forward, such as template in terms of reference, policies on liaison roles, that sort of thing. So to start off tonight, we are going to, well, I'll just ask, is there any questions on the report to committee cover? Just outline. afternoon. So moving into the review report itself, we'd like to start with the Arts Endowment Committee, which is located on page 7 of the report itself, and agency number 2. So just to go through, first of all, the leading chart, which is a standardized chart we're hoping to show you for each committee, which identifies a number of the key elements that Tony perhaps to refer to as you're considering amendments or continuations. So first of all, the type of this one is an internal council committee. And that means that it's been formed by council resolution, and the terms of reference are also something that council has had a hand in developing and approving. The current operating budget for the Lacombe Arts Endowment Committee is $8,000 in 2020. This is interest from the endowment fund, which we'll discuss a little bit later on in this review. In-kind city contributions are event support expenditures up to about $6,000 in a number of different small lines. And of course, administrative support again, which we'll review in a moment. Reserve balance is none. Minutes submission required, and the answers to that is yes. You do see them from time to time in your information box. Appointment term is 3 years, maximum 2 terms in a row for your councillor and for other members. Alternate council appointee required, the answer is no. Meeting frequency is minimum of 2 annually, 2 meetings. Typically, it's about 4, I understand. One is needed for any kind of events that they may be, or other activities they may engage in. Typically, 4 are needed at 2 hours each meeting on average. That gives you an indication of the time required for that council appointee. The city administrative support is itemized there. Managerial liaison is also named by position. Mandate overlap with other committees, potentially with public art committee, there's been some discussion of that. Council remuneration is not applicable. Cost to council members also not applicable. And the current council member is Councillor Jonathan Jacobson, and he is a voting member. The current membership, aside from Councillor Jacobson, is Teresa Johnson, Janine Borger, Jan Holoboff, and there's a vacancy. The service area is arts and culture, and the IAP2 spectrum, which I'll discuss a little bit later in the report, is empowered. So the Arts Endowment Fund is with the Red Deer District Community Foundation, and the fund's roots go back 17 years. It was first called the Cultural Fund, and then it was formally endowed, I believe, in 2005. The fund's purpose is to provide support for continuing education in an arts field for Lacombe City and Lacombe County residents. More information on the background and the history of this committee is included on report pages 7 and 8. Agency-city relationship is a section of the report that details on how the city has set up the committee, how the committee reports, the level of in-kind support currently contributed, including administrative support. So in the case of the Arts Endowment Committee, it is a committee that has a terms of reference that are adopted by council resolution. The committee reports to council through minutes and also through, of course, public promotion of its activities. And the level of in-kind support currently contributed is primarily the administrative support that is done through our community services executive / arts and culture assistant. Essentially, the committee is fully amendable by council through approvals to its terms of reference, budget approvals, and of course, appointments made. Agency input. So this is a case where we both surveyed the current and past council members, committee members, through a survey that was done online. And we also interviewed, in this case, the admin support to the committee to get a really good idea of how the committee is currently functioning and how it has functioned in the past, and any needs that may be present at the time. Just a note, of course, that as outlined in the cover report to this review, The survey did have an error in its rollout so that responses from all 3 agencies surveyed were aggregated into one. It's really unfortunate. However, the interview of individual members and also selected input was still used where we could see that it was applicable to this particular committee. And just want to make a note about that. Really printed that very strange here, so I'm going to have a bit of a struggle. 76% felt that their committee's work has had a considerable impact in the community, and 71% of the members surveyed were certain about their role and their committee's role in city service provision, and that's literally not this committee. My apologies. My printout of the report has been mixed up quite badly. However, it is in the review report there for your reference. In terms of IAP2, which is the standard to which the city's public consultation policy is developed. And in your cover report to this review, you'll see that there's actually a spectrum that's outlined there from informed to empowered with a number of four different additional levels in the spectrum. This committee is empowered. It's at the end of the spectrum, which means that the group is able to make decisions without seeking council resolution. That's done through its terms of reference.
Excuse me, Director Duke.
Yes.
Because it's mentioned in the report there about the Arts Endowment Fund, I think it's important that we mention to the public the operation of that fund. I think some might be under the impression that that fund is directed by this board, when in fact that is not really the case. So for the record, perhaps you could just a brief synopsis on how that is administered, which is where they generate the income from, correct?
That's correct. So the income, the budget for the Arts Endowment Committee is actually also revenue to the city from the Arts Endowment Fund. That's an endowed fund with the Red Deer District Community Foundation. It's a conglomeration of donations and fundraising and proceeds from fundraising events that's been collected there. It was seeded by the city with about a $4,000 contribution in its earliest year. But since that time, it's collection of contributions from the community. The endowed funds can never be withdrawn. They can only be used for the purposes of the that are specified on the account at the Red Deer District Community Foundation. So that's a perpetual fund.
Thank you.
So I want to go through the city agency amendments that the administration is going to propose. But to do that, I'm going to just have to sort through my really strange printout. Just take a moment here to do that.
While you're looking at those notes, Director Duke, I think that Councillor Hoekstra had a question as well.
Yeah, so, sorry, thank you, Mayor Creasy. You asked if we had any questions regarding the memo, and I didn't realize that it had applied to the committee review project charter. And I wondered if we could actually look at the charter first, because is it the overarching whatever document that we're going to use for the reviews? Because if it is, I wouldn't mind looking at that first, because I have just some comments that I feel need to be answered before we go further with the committees. Is that fair? I didn't realize that was part of the memo, because I saw it as a second document.
I don't have a problem with revisiting that. However, given that Director Duke is partially through this first one, perhaps we could finish it up if that's okay, and then we will bounce back rather than stopping and starting halfway through. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Hopefully that'll avoid as much confusion as we possibly can.
I'm going to have to upload the review report online before I can continue with my presentation. Very sorry. Just give me a moment.
Was that for the questions from the survey?
It's just to be able to outline the the administration's recommendations for amending the committee. I have to have a report and it's.
So I have it up here. While you're finding that, Director Duke, I'll go through the first couple, just so that we're not putting pressure on you. So the first proposal that administration has put forward through this review, and it is recommended for implementation, is cease the appointment of a councillor voting member to the committee. And so here, the city has empowered this committee in all decision-making and it's receiving adequate reporting on the activities of the committee. The committee is also promoting its activities to the public in multiple formats, including a council representative reporting to council. A council representative at the meetings is not necessary to ensure that the committee continues to achieve its city mandate. The second proposed that we would suggest for your consideration, but not recommend, is to disband the committee entirely and assign the art development program directly to staff. Although there would be some monetary savings and resource savings here, it would not balance the loss of significant volunteer contributions that have been made over time. The public can take into the decision-making process. So we don't recommend that, but you could. And third, we looked at amalgamation with the Public Art Collection Committee. There does seem to be an overlap of mandate and function between the two art committees. And so there's been suggestions over time that these two functions could be handled out of a single committee. However, when we looked at this, they actually are quite separate functions that they're currently performing. The only overlap is that it has to do with art. Risks of amalgamating would include volunteer burnout with additional demands placed on fewer volunteers, and the potential that one function will subsume or begin to serve rather than support the other. So if we could, we do have some strategic plan alignment identified, but I won't go through that in detail. But I would love to hear council's thoughts on the three proposed amendments.
Thank you. Given that Councillor Jacobson is our representative on this first committee, would you like the opportunity to open remarks?
So I'll preface it by saying both this and the art collection committee are very delightful to sit on, just in terms of the quality of the people who sit on it. So that is certainly enjoyable. I would, however, definitely concur with these three recommendations here, for the reasons that have been stated by Director Drew, who put this together. Certainly when I think of the time demanded from all of us as councillors to sit on these boards, and as it's been very well documented, I have the lightest love of everybody here. I see this as being very, very easily functionable without a councillor saying that. I'm not entirely sure that a councillor has any role to sit on, to be frank with all of you, and to better divvy up the burden with a lot more time demanding committees, I think would be a better use of a councillor's time. I don't think it should be disbanded for those. I mean, they put a lot of work into raising the money, and it's a very tight group in the community that does it. But yeah, I would definitely recommend that the council not sit on this for sure.
Thank you. Any additional comments, Councillor Hoekstra?
My only comment, and I'm not part of those committees, but I just wondered how we would keep track of this committee if we no longer have a councillor on it and we potentially would have a change in staff at the city. Because I think the success of this committee is definitely due to city staff, possibly too, and her personal passion for the arts. So I was curious, if we suddenly had a change in staff, how would we keep track of this? Like, not keep track, but I'm just, would it suddenly kind of disband and we might not even know because we don't have a councillor on it anymore? I don't know. I just wondered about the success of this committee and how we credit it almost to a staff and her whole committee. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not only due to that.
I think that's a fair question. However, it does state in here that the minutes from those meetings are in fact submitted. So I guess that's one
That's true.
method. Chief Cody?
Certainly, we do have our current staff member is very dedicated and goes above and beyond in her service of these committees.
Yeah.
But I am confident that we would be able to find someone that in time, if she were to retire or move to a different job, in time would be able to pick up that torch and continue with it. You've also got some long-term committee members there that I'm sure would work really hard to make sure there was continuity. So that is a concern for sure, but it's not one that's insurmountable for us.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up then, is this in her job description?
Yes.
Okay, then that's, because then the next, okay.
Councillor Conick, are you still with us?
Yes, I am, Mayor Christie.
Did you have anything that you would care to add or ask regarding the Arts Endowment Committee?
Oh, I support the recommendations that so long as they don't disband the committee, I think it's still a good committee to continue with. And I would agree that I don't, having sat on that committee, it's, as Councillor Jacobs says, it's a terrific group of volunteers that do a great job. But do we necessarily need to have a councillor there? No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'm just going to repeat a couple things here because the transmission was not, was less than perfect. You are not in favor of disbanding this committee. However, you do not see the need for a council representative to sit on it. And you also commended the work of the volunteers that sit on this committee currently. Is that a fair summation?
That is exactly it, sir. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. How often are you meeting, Jonathan?
Well, ideally, 4 times a year, but it tends to be a pretty fluid situation.
So,
I'd say between 2 and 4 times per year.
so really, it's not, this isn't a hardship for a councillor to be on that, I don't think. And is it worthwhile? Is there information coming back that we wouldn't see from the minutes? Like, would you insight into what they do and provide to the community?
So it's not a hardship in terms of the amount of time required in a given year, that's for sure. Where it's a little more difficult from a councillor's perspective is that this particular committee and the art committee have a very difficult time keeping their meeting dates. And often they are changed. As I said, I've just stopped bothering to check. I just check in my email to see when it's happening that particular night and hope it doesn't conflict with anything else I got going on. So if you have a particularly busy, or if you have a busier schedule, which, you know, I do, and a lot of you guys do, you know, that's where the hardship comes in, is that it's very difficult to plan around. So that just seems to be a function of the volunteers who make up the board. They all have various things going on, and it just seems to be an issue. I haven't seen anything from the committee in terms of information that would be useful to pass on that couldn't very easily be reflected in a report from the administration who's tasked with that at any given time. Mostly it's just, you know, the balances of the fund and how much they're keeping out, and you know, various ideas for fundraisers for the year.
Thank you. Anyone else? Director Duke, was there some indications that you would like to take with respect to this, or do you have a good indication where we're at? How did you want to handle each one of these separately?
I'd like to see a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of
Very good.
indication, and then we can go from there.
So let's do that now then.
We do that. What are we thumbs upping?
You know what? Normally that would be fine, but given Councillor Hoekstra's desire to revisit the charter, I think maybe that would be appropriate to do that prior to voting on this, or not voting, indicating the direction that you would like us to pursue. So let's just take a little step back then, and was there some particular areas that you would like to go through, Councillor Hoekstra, or did you want?
Yes, please, Mayor
The
Chrissy.
floor is yours.
So the charter being the document that's going to guide this process, I just had some questions about it. And it started with okay, is the charter paged? Well, the second page of the charter, it refers to agencies and committees interchangeably. And I just wondered, like project stakeholders is a good, if you can see the bullets there. I guess I was wondering if we could have some definitions about that, because of course, this came to light when I was reading about Rikabetsu's committee. It was called an agency. And in my mind, an agency is different than a committee or it's a society. So I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page as to what is an internal committee, what is a board, what is a commission, what is an external agency. All of those are listed below project stakeholders, but yet through the document, they're called agencies. So that would be my comment. May I continue, Mayor Creasy? Just.
Would you like a
Would you like?
response on that
Yeah,
one?
sure.
Yeah, okay, so there are so many different types that it's difficult to pick one word that applies to all. Because initially the strategic plan goal was to review council committees, which are committees that are formed by council resolution, specific. And so those are 100% internal, they're formed by council, they're amendable by council. The other one that I would say, type of committee or agency that is like that are any that are formed by city bylaw. Again, 100% internal. When you talk about external agencies, there's boards, commissions, and committees as well. An example of that would be the Red Deer District. No, sorry, Matt, if you could give us the name of the Water Commission.
With Red Deer Regional Wastewater Services Commission.
That's an example of a commission that's external. So agency refers to anything other than an internally formed committee or board. That makes sense?
So in here under project milestones and work plans, you've got sections A and B, internal agencies and external agencies. So here you're using agencies to refer to any type of organization where people meet to decide something, correct? Is that?
That is correct.
And you got it?
And then internal and external are actually defined in the charter above that project stakeholders.
Does that help clarify some things, Councillor Hoekstra?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yes, it does. I guess when you put what Rikabetsu does beside a commission, they're both external. They're very they're not the same at all. So I guess, but I get that just as long as we're all on the same page with that one. Then under, may I continue? Just a couple questions. CLT, what does that mean?
Oh, sorry, corporate leadership team.
Okay, because I don't think that was defined anywhere in here either, and unless I missed it, and it could be that I missed it, I'm not gonna. And then under departmental responsibilities, there's lots of different numberings and it's kind of over, there's 2 ones, and then I didn't know if methods, do you see that page? I don't know what page
This
that
is on core responsibilities, did you say?
It's core,
No, developmental.
core team responsibilities, and then, departmental responsibilities. It's on page 10 of our agenda document, but there's no paging on here. I just wanted, like, the department manager designates will, and then present a final report. Are those both responsibilities, or what are we asking for there? Or what, and methods, is that another responsibility? Do you see where I'm referring?
Yes.
I do.
Yeah. I just thought if this is going to be the document that guides us through this process, I was hoping to have some clarity on those.
No, and those are fair comments. I think that we can certainly add a few more definitions to them and clean up some of the clerical items so there's no confusion. That's the reason why we're doing this, is for clarity and transparency. So to have a confusing document is not exactly appropriate. So we'll certainly make those necessary changes and add a couple more definitions as well.
And then my last question had to do with the survey. So always happens. First time you run it, there might, not always, there could be a mistake. But going forward then, will the surveys be agency specific?
Specific.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Mayor Cruz.
Not a problem at all. So you've got a little direction administratively there on some document adjustments. And then if we could revert back to item number, or I'm sorry, agency number 2, for a little clearer direction as to council's wishes on that one. We can do that now if you'd like.
Great. So I guess I'll just go through each one separately and ask for council's comments on that. So there are 3 recommendations. Cease appointing a councillor voting member to this committee. Is recommendation number 1.
Councillor Connick, you had indicated that you would go along with that recommendation.
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks. That was unanimous.
Unanimous.
Or strongly in favor. Yes, maybe it's not really voting.
Number 2 is disband the committee and assign the art development program directly to staff.
Councillor Connick,
No, we shouldn't disband the committee. No, sir.
thank you very much. I think that was fairly clear direction here as well.
And number 3 is amalgamate this committee with the Public Art Collection Committee, which we haven't reviewed yet, but we'll do that next.
I guess before we have an indication of that, I believe it was Councillor Jacobson said there may be some different functions. You ought to know because he sits on both. But I'm not necessarily sold that we have enough information to be able to properly lead this. But I mean, I'm all for efficiency. And if one of these boards is only meeting perhaps a couple of times a year, I don't know if it's too onerous or if it's different, a great deal of different individuals that are attracted to either, or what's the situation? I don't know.
Well, perhaps we can leave that consideration for after we review the the Lacombe Art Collection Committee, and then we can revisit, because the same recommendation or the same option is in that committee review as well. So we can do that next if you like.
Does that seem like a reasonable step, Council? Very good. Let's continue on then.
So I'll just give you the page number of the report, the review report that we're going to. These are a little out of order, sorry, because we had reorganized the review report to coincide with council's schedule here today. So we're going to now review agency number 3, which is on page 22 of your agenda. The type of committee that we're talking about now is also an internal council committee. Operational and reference docs are listed there for you, and I believe that you can click on those and jump to the particular document. The 2020 operating budget for this particular committee is $28,000 for art acquisition and for murals. There's an additional note here that there is also, it varies quite a bit, that there's a capital budget in some years for this committee to use as well. The 2020 capital budget is yet to be determined. It is 1% of the eligible portion of the annual construction project of cities approved capital budgets. And it's particular projects and it's particular sections of their budget that are appropriate. And that's spelled out in policy, I'll just let you know. In-kind city contributions at this time are administrative support, event and meeting incidentals. The reserve balance, there are 2 reserves for this that this committee does oversee. One is the art bank, which is $4,148 currently, and the mural reserve, which is currently standing at just over $18,000. Discuss those a little bit more in a few minutes. Minutes are also required by council from this committee. The appointment term is 3 years, maximum 2 terms concurrent. Alternate council member is not required or not provided for. Meeting frequency is again minimum two meetings annually, typically up to 4 as needed, each being 2 hours. Administrative support for this committee is also the Community Services Executive / Arts and Culture Assistant. And the city manager liaison is again the manager of recreation and culture. Mandate overlap with other committees, potential with the Arts Endowment Committee. Remuneration and cost to council members are both not applicable. The council appointee currently is Councillor Johnson Jacobson, who is a voting member. Additional memberships are a member of the Lacombe Arts Endowment Committee, and it's the committee that decides that. Karen Penrice, Shirley Flynn, a representative from the Lacombe District Recreation Parks and Culture Board, and a Lacombe Arts Endowment Committee representative, which I already mentioned. Service area is again arts and culture. IAP2 spectrum is empowered. The Lacombe Art Collection Committee is 13 years old. Its current terms of reference are 5 years old. They were updated in 2015, and those are available to you as a resource document in this review. The committee's purpose is to steer municipal support of the development of public art within the community to further the community's recognition and reputation as a cultural center in the province. More information on the background and history is included in the report on report pages 11 and 12. Agency-city relationship is again, these are details of how the city has set up the committee, which was done by approval of the terms of reference. The committee reports through minutes submissions to council, and it also sets up a plan for the year and reports and promotes its achievements and its milestones publicly. The level of in-kind support currently contributed includes primarily the administrative support. And essentially the committee being internal is fully amendable by council for approval to its terms of reference, budget, and appointees. Agency input, again, select input was used from the total results where we could see that it was applicable to this committee. In this case, a number of the respondents' comments indicated that as a volunteer, their experience on the committee was impactful. In terms of IAP2, this committee is public consultation on the empowered end of the spectrum, which means the group is able to make decisions without seeking council resolution. They do, however, follow the city's procurement policy because the person who is most likely to be doing the work with a request for proposal, etc., is the city staff person. And then we have some potential, some options for city agency amendments. I'll just scroll to that. Sorry, it takes a moment. Again, we have option 1 being cease appointing a councillor, voting member to the committee. This is not recommended by administration for the reasons outlined in the report. Option 2 is disband the committee and assign the art collection program directly to staff. Again, not recommended as there would be no monetary savings really, and at the same time that subject matter expertise and volunteer help would be lost. It's also noted here that it's a program that will affect common spaces belonging to everyone in the community. And so potentially that's a high impact for a large number of people, which in the IAP2 spectrum means that you should be keeping it at the high end of the spectrum for your consultation level. And then the third one is amalgamate with the Arts Endowment Committee. So I'll just read this out. A perceived overlap of mandate and function between the two art committees has led to the suggestion that the two be amalgamated to save on meeting days and time. However, the two mandates and functions are very different, with the only overlap being that the committees both work in the same municipal service area, which is arts and culture. Risks include volunteer burnout with a more diverse mandate, coupled with fewer people and meetings, and the potential that one function will subsume or begin to serve rather than support the other. So that's basically the same comments that we had with the Arts Endowment. Consolidated update policies is a fourth option, which is recommended by administration. The Public Art Collection Committee adheres to 3 separate council policies developed over time. when they were needed. Administration sees value in revising these policies for clarity and consolidating them into one up-to-date reference point for council, the committee, the public, and staff. A draft consolidated policy has been developed with committee involvement and is ready for council's consideration at an upcoming council meeting. So at this point, I'd ask for council's indications as to if any or all of the options are desired.
Thank you, Director Duke. Just for clarity on the documentation, it says the collection has grown from 174 pieces to 261 pieces, and then a value there. Is that over the 10 years since the development of the management plan, or is that this year? What is?
Those numbers are from 2018, and I did receive an update today, and I'm sorry, but it's on my desk.
Okay, so as of 2018, there was 261 pieces in there?
That's correct. I believe it's grown by approximately 100 pieces.
It's just a little confusing. It says the collection has grown from 174 pieces, but it doesn't say from when or.
Sorry, that would be to, not from.
Thanks for joining us, Councillor Connick. You're in person. Is there anything that you would like to start off with this particular item?
I can, if you'd like. I've had the privilege of serving on all three of these committees in review tonight. I support the recommendations as they've been outlined here. I do believe it's important to still have councillor on this committee, just because of the dollar value attached. For example, when we redid the arena, art collection committee was responsible for almost $100,000 worth of art for that facility. So just in the interest of accountability, and I don't want to say oversight, but especially in accountability, when we're dealing with that kind of taxpayer dollars, there should most definitely be an elected official on that committee, is my thoughts. Definitely do not delete the committee. And again, I would not amalgamate with arts endowments. Both do two very different things. I think they need to be separate entities going forward. Otherwise, I would agree with the recommendations put forth there. I did want to, couldn't say it when I was driving, but I did want to commend Director Duke and her team for their efforts in putting this together. I like what you've seen here so far. And I was cutting out my colleagues, so I couldn't hear everything Councillor Hoekstra was trying to say, but otherwise, I support it.
Thank you. Chief Gotti, was there something you wanted to add? Before,
I believe that the time period, the growth of the art collection is from 2010 to 2018, so I think that's an 8-year period where approximately 100 pieces were added.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any input that Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was just trying to find it. You included some minutes of council meeting on September 10th, 2007. Could you indicate why? I was looking, and it's my fault too. Maybe what was I looking for in those minutes? Is it the last? What was it applying to? Like, it does talk about the art collection policy.
I believe I can comment, Councillor Hoekstra, it's Ross. It looks like the last attachment is the Town of Lacombe Public Art Collection Policy adopted September 10th, 2007. And that's a former policy, but that's the same date that was adopted by council. And those are the minutes just illustrating that fact attached to the bottom of it. They were attached to the actual former policy. So if you look above the minutes, you'll see that old policy, same date as the minutes.
Thank you.
Certainly, there's been a bit of comment about this whole amalgamation between the two. I guess maybe I like maybe some perceived efficiencies. I appreciate that they're kind of different function. I'm just, for some of the reasons that were given as far as perhaps being a little too onerous. Is it correct that both of these committees meet twice a year?
Yes, they do.
So
Together?
each committee is twice a year, so I guess what I'm getting at is by amalgamating, we're looking at 4 a year, once every 3 months. Unless there's a tremendous amount of background work, research, that kind of thing that goes into each one of them, I don't see that as being necessarily a huge factor. I mean, given that obviously everyone that is volunteering on these has certainly an interest in the arts. I'm just curious as to the possible other reasons that maybe aren't listed in the report as to why we would not consider it anyway. Councillor Clark?
I think it depends on the year too. I know when I sat on the committee when the arena was being renovated, the Arts Collection Committee, we sat actually, it was more than twice a year. It was at least, because the RFP went out for artists to submit their ideas, and we had a meeting to review those ideas. Then we had another meeting to pick a final submission. So that particular year, I know we met, I think at least 6 times, maybe 7 times. So I guess it depends on the year. If you've got a big project and you've got a big tender like that, I mean, otherwise on any given year, and if there's not a lot in the loop, yeah, maybe they get away with just 2 meetings a year, but I think it depends on the year. And as far as amalgamating, you could amalgamate them, I suppose, but you know, Arts Endowment looks specifically at the endowment, and there's a couple meetings where they deal with that and handing out, you know, we review the submissions and so forth. And then the Arts Collection looks at art, you know, it's a different set of criteria every time. So at the end of the day, you could probably do it, but I think in the interest of, they do 2 very different things, and I think it just serves their interest if they just continue down those paths. That's my opinion.
Fair enough, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Jacobson?
Sure, so I suppose I should weigh in on this. So my thoughts on amalgamation are, I guess I have a bit of a different take on the explanation below for not doing it. And I do see the potential for volunteer burnout. That's because in my experience, they seem to be having a much more difficult time in recruiting members for the boards. To sit on those vacancies a lot. It's an aging population. They've kind of got a standing joke that they've been sitting on forever kind of thing, right? So I'm fine with this sitting apart for now, but what I do see down the road is you may not have enough, you know, because they do require actually a bit of volunteer time to come in and move art around and that kind of thing, right? So that is probably the one thing that they do. That's probably the biggest time crunch of all that, right? So I could actually see a scenario down the road where just frankly, because they can't get enough committed able volunteers to sit on both, it may be better to stick them both together because at least you've got art-minded people, and then they could very easily task half the committee with endowment things and the other with art collection things. But I think that could probably be dealt with down the road if in fact they do have a much more difficult time, or if they continue to have a difficult time getting newer and younger members on it. I guess I am going to buck the trend a bit here and play devil's advocate and tell you that I do think that I would recommend not having a councillor on this committee again too. Again, for the very simple reason that, and again, maybe it's because for the time I've been on it, I didn't have $100,000 disbursement to handle. But I have not seen anything that would remotely lead me to think that this committee could not handle public art procurement. I've never seen anything that makes me think we've got anything contentious, divisive, or anything remotely coming to community conflict with this. It is true that for this committee, just like the endowment committee, we have a very, very capable staff person who is just privately very involved in the art community as well too. So that's both a strength and a weakness, as Councillor Hooks mentioned. But again, I haven't seen anything to suggest that that administrative person couldn't very easily handle the city's representation on it. And again, if the point of this whole exercise is to again identify, I mean, because we all agree that there are committees that need to be cut if we're going to, because we keep on getting requests for more and more sittings. So if I had to honestly weigh it on the merits of is a counselor needed at this board for it to function completely fine as I've seen it function for the last 3 years. I don't have to tell you no. Now, if the merit is simply, or pardon me, if the question is based off of, you know, is it nice to have a counselor there to bring the city's perspective? Of course it is, but again, I haven't seen anything suggest that that perspective is even remotely necessary for this board to function.
Thank you. So, seems to me both of the previous speakers suggest it's an element of responsibility for the dollars that are involved in this particular committee. I wonder if there was perhaps some methodology we could come up with, some checks and balances we could in place, perhaps some sort of a limit before it required further further approvals from council, or what is it that would make everyone comfortable? I mean,
I do agree with Councillor Connick that if there was a $100,000 art purchase being done for a building, it really should probably have council representation in there for sure. Again, and that's why I said my experience is only just based on what I've seen. We haven't had that. I don't know how those are coming out, but yeah. So I don't know how you put that into policy, but I'm sure it could be.
And I don't think that it's unrealistic that type of a situation could very well happen again. I guess is it the involvement in the committee with those dollars, or is it the overall approval from council in general that is the deciding factor there for you, or for any of us? I'm just curious.
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't quite understand. Is it the number? Like, is it the dollar amount that's the deciding factor?
Well, some are suggesting that they definitely want some sort of council involvement. Is it the involvement on the actual committee itself that is important, or is it the final approval in a situation where there is larger amounts of money, of dollars involved? That is.
Well, we wouldn't. An individual councillor wouldn't have final approval regardless, right? They're just one vote on the committee.
Correct.
So it would really just be adding council's perspective for a substantial purchase like that. I think that would be the important thing.
Perhaps I wasn't clear with the differentiation. If in fact we didn't have any council representation on this board, and we had some mechanism whereby they had to bring final decision making for those larger purchases, which haven't happened in your tenure, but they could in the future, that those would have to be brought forward to council for approval. Would that give that level of comfort? Because we are ultimately responsible for those expenditures. Would that give that level of comfort to either of you that brought it up?
So, I mean, the broad strokes of that mechanism, I think would probably very much accomplish exactly what I think council should be involved in for this particular committee. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Somebody else had their hand up over here? No.
I was thinking, Mayor Creasy, I was just wondering what that capital budget was for them. Is it on an annual basis that they get that?
It's based on 1% of eligible capital projects. So eligible capital projects are capital investments by the city of over $10,000, I believe, that are they're accessible to the public, and roads and streetscaping are exempt, as are utility projects. So
it's not a huge number that they're getting.
Well, it depends on what our capital budget was, as Councillor Connick has referenced. When the police station was built, there was a fairly large expenditure made because of, or basically as a result of that expenditure.
In the arena.
In the arena too.
It's like $10,000 per million kind of thing.
That's 1%.
Yeah.
Councillor Connick?
Yeah, I guess I just said at a time when we had a couple of big projects like the police station and the arena, and those were significant price tags for that work. And I could see it happen. I'm not sure if it's a little gray area sometimes, like when we build a public works yard. I think there's 1% attached there, but you cited if it's publicly accessible, so maybe not. But I think, did we not for Highway 2A, there was money set aside from that, and that's part of the,
So only portions of the project that are eligible. And there is also options in the policy if we think that the investment wouldn't be at a good spot. So let's say a public works building, for example, maybe you don't want to spend $50,000 on art at the front of it, but you could put that money into an art bank and look at a different spot that's more publicly beneficial.
Councilor Ross?
Thanks, Mark Creasy. So on particular projects with the arena, the police first building, was there a counselor on that building committee? I have no idea. It's before our time. So there was still counselor representation on them projects, even if it wasn't specific to the arts.
You good? So I will answer separately for each project. So the police station, we did have a counselor on the preliminary concept design phase of the project. So I believe it was Councilor Boussler that was involved. On the arena, that was all of council was engaged to an extent on the project, but there would have been, I believe, Councilor Connick specifically to the art component of those projects through these committees as well.
So in the future, if you have a fire hall that's 6 million, so 1% is 60 grand.
Councilor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So part of these amendments, could we have an amendment that says, that directs administration to develop a policy that if there's some kind of threshold that maybe a counselor has to come back onto that committee, was that already said? Did I miss that? But, and could that be number 5 or something?
By all means. Director Duke?
I was just going to comment, that would be an option to amend the terms of reference.
Okay.
You could. So I would just suggest that it not be a counselor come back on to the committee, but rather there be some counselor engagement for the one purchase. Let's say $10,000 is the threshold. Then anytime there's a purchase of over $10,000, that it comes to council and that there's a delegation of council that reviews it in some way, we can develop that for sure.
Councilor Connick?
I just, at the end of the day, I don't think it's a particularly onerous committee. It's not a ton of time. I can't speak for Councilor Jackson, but I really enjoyed that committee. It's a lot of fun, actually. And so even if it's just something like the carving of the trees at Pope House Park, to be involved in that process, I think it's a lot of, to me, it's a PERC committee. I'm going to say it's a PERC committee. I enjoyed my time. I think any of you would enjoy your time on that committee. And to say just, well, you can only sit there if you hit a certain threshold, well, I don't know. To me, I think there should be council representation all the time. If it's 10,000 or 100,000, it's still public dollars. Arts endowment, that's money that's from the endowment fund. That's not really our money, so to speak. It's just interest on that. I mean, it comes to us, but you know what I'm saying? We're not putting public money into that. This we are, and I think it's, I don't know, I just think it's just, we should just continue with the council committee on our council representation. I just think it's not, if we were meeting every month, it might be a little much. It's not.
Your points are well taken, Councilor Connick. I guess when I initially asked that question, I found it interesting that both of those committees have a vacant seat on them. Perhaps that's just a coincidence. I don't believe so, though. I'm just curious if attracting individuals to either of these committees is problematic. That was the reason I even brought up the subject of amalgamating the two and perhaps fostering a little more interest that way as to one arts-related committee without trying to detract the work that either of them do. Councilor Connick?
So just a quick follow-up. I would agree with Councilor Jackson. I think there may come a turning point where you can't get those volunteers, and maybe you do need to know. Sure. I know when I'm done with my time on council, I'll gladly sit on this committee after the fact. But you know, and there may come a time. But for right now, if there's a way to separate them, I think that's in the best interest of both committees.
quick comment on that, if I may.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. There may not have been stellar promotion of the opportunities for these committees. I don't think that the committee recruitment and application process has been updated in many years. And one of the goals of this review is to also look at that and develop some templates and refresh it and maybe bring it into the 20th century. It's a way to do that.
Councillor Ross.
Like Mayor Creasy, following up with Councilor was just saying, like, could it be to the point where upon a construction project that's $60,000, like I alluded to, then that could be an amendment where that their report and recommendations would come to council for approval? Would that be a compromise, I guess, rather than, because that's a significant amount of money, obviously, right? So.
I think that was specifically what Councillor Hoekstra was.
Right, that's my point.
And alluded to as well, so perhaps we should consider some form of a question that I'm going to leave up to Director Duke to add in addition to the indications that you require on this. Is that fair? And Councillor Hibbs.
I was just going to express like a support for that. I guess the tricky part, I think, with that would be the actual setting a dollar value. And I'm not going to suggest one as I have no idea, but yes, I would also be in favor of that. So I think that's the right road to go.
Councillor Connick.
My only counter to that is that the job of this committee is to go through that whole process. So if you've got a big project like that for the arena, like I said, it was 7 meetings that, where we had the tenders went out, we had to come in, we reviewed it and everything. And then they do all that work and then you bring it to council and council says, no, that's no good, we don't like that. So I'm not sure if we're any further ahead there, right? Like that committee is tasked with signing that money, to looking at the request for proposal and ultimately making the selection. I don't know if it's then more work for that to come back to council, or you have council say, well, that looks ugly, I really don't like that, let's kind of put the kibosh to that, and then where are we at, right? So I get where you're coming from and your concerns, but I think as long as we have a council representative on there, it's their job to come back and report on, say, look, this is what we're doing, this is what we've come up with, and flesh it out that way, rather than take that council member out and have it bring to us, and add to another busy council meeting and say, what do you think of this? Because it's very subjective. That's the other problem with this. That art is very subjective. So I can see when we run into that where Chris says, well, that's just the ugliest thing I've ever seen, and why would we spend $60,000 on that for the fire hall? And then they're back at square one, and then so you see where I'm at. It is.
So given that we don't necessarily have those massive capital expenditures all of the time, is this something that you would see? I mean, we know as they're coming up from the budget, so then someone would be accounted, or rather appointed at that time to serve until the fruition of that project? Or how would you?
But like I say, I think we just keep having a member on there full time.
Okay.
Because it's like I'll give you an example, police commission. Everyone else is on a police commission. I think it's counterintuitive as a police commission. If I sat there for a year and Councilor Hibbs sat there for a year, someone else sat there for a year, same thing here. It's not super onerous, that committee, but if you're going to commit to that, they need to be there full time. I can't throw them in there here and there and say, okay, now you're in, now you're out, now you're in, now you're out. It's not counterintuitive, I think, even to that council member. They kind of need to know, okay, I'm committed to this for 4 years. I know I'm going to have to meet at least 4 or 5 times a year. No problem. Right?
Councilor Jacobson, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'll just point out, so I wouldn't support any kind of policy that would give council a veto over the art committee. I would just think of it as a way to give council feedback to the art committee, as to their selections, just like any other, just like the one councillor wouldn't have a veto, on the committee right now, right? So if there was confusion, I didn't pick up from what we were discussing that we were talking about a potential policy where council is the ultimate now decider on art. I just thought it was council gave. But I just wanted to make that clarification.
I think some excellent points made, and given that art is a subjective thing, I don't think I'm certainly not interested in veto power. I'm not an art critic, and don't necessarily want that task. So I guess I'm still struggling as to the function of a counselor on that committee. It had been indicated that it was a financial oriented question. So if in fact we don't have the ultimate decision on what's purchased, what is the financial question? What is it that we're there to do? I guess it would be my ultimate question. Director Duke?
So the part of the purpose of developing a liaison policy, the council would be to develop that into words that everyone can then point to and agree on. But essentially, in my research, what I've seen is that the city liaison, i.e. the councillor appointee on a committee, is there to represent the city's interests, whatever those are. But of course, with an internal committee, that person's comments in the committee meeting and their take on certain proposals, whatever the committee's considering, would have to carry an awful lot of weight. Given that the council and the city itself can disband that committee that quick with one resolution. So with full power to amend the committee, the councillor's position on an item, councillor appointee on that committee, their position on an item should be considered very highly and very seriously by the committee, I would think.
Sounds good in theory, but it still comes down to a vote, doesn't it? And there's only one vote. Right? But your point's well taken. Councillor Connick?
I think it just speaks to an accountability thing. So for example, you know that stupid grading they have in Calgary or whatever, cost $1 million, all right? So if there, and I don't know how that came about, or if there was an assuming elected official involved in that process, maybe not. But my point is, so if you're gonna spend that kind of money and there's no elected official there, and people might, I would be upset as a person. So we've got 6 people who decided this was a good idea, and there's no elected official there, right? Same thing here. Like, I think it's just, again, it speaks to a little bit of accountability. If you're going to spend $100,000, it's probably good that there's a counselor there who can report on that, who can report on what's going on, so that if there is a public uproar, then you could say, well, we were vetted, we knew what was going on, we were a part of the process, we're accountable for that. That's my, take that counselor out and they make those decisions on their own, then we have a harder time, I think, answering to that to the public. Maybe it's just me.
I guess I would bring back the original thought that art is a subjective thing. How is one more person, just because they happen to be an elected official, going to change that?
But it's just a way of saying to the people, yes, that decision was made. We have a counselor there. He kept us in the loop. May not be happy with that $1 million in the big old ring, but we knew it was coming because our counselor told us that because he sat on that committee. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I do, but it's pretty clearly laid out. It's going to be 1% of that expenditure. We know that before the project is ever initiated. So, I mean, there's lots of good points here, but I just genuinely wonder what it is that we're accomplishing by having someone there that is adding value that isn't already inherently on that board of arts and culture minded individuals. That's my own question. Anything else before we go over before Director Duke asks for input? Have we crafted some sort of a question outlining Councillor Hoekster's point as well?
Yes.
Very good.
So if we can do the thumbs up, thumbs down exercise again, we have option number 1 is to cease appointing a council member to the Public Art Collection Committee.
Sorry, what was the question? Do not appoint him?
No longer appoint a council member to, that's the option.
I would say that looks like a defeat. Sorry? One more time? I think it was 4 thumbs down.
Sorry.
So no council.
My apologies. That was for support. That was carried.
Support
My
of.
apologies.
So let's just clarify, so no longer a council elected, is that what I'm saying?
Well, no,
That is the first indication.
That's
We
just
will
an
move
indication.
forward.
It's not a vote.
Okay.
The second one was the option to disband the committee entirely and assign the program to staff.
I think that was fairly clear.
Amalgamate the two committees.
And that's fairly clear as well.
Fourth one is consolidate policies and update them.
I would say that is yes, by most.
And the last one, number 5, would be to amend the terms of reference to allow for a spending threshold.
We have a question before we, that one, Councillor Utcher, go ahead.
I like how that's stated, but I was scrolling through here, I'm not finding the terms of reference.
It's a linked document. So the 2007 document that you
Okay,
pointed out
sorry.
is actually the one that establishes the committee. It's not a particularly well-developed, it's not a standardized terms of reference. This is one of the ones that was developed kind of in flight or just in the course of things.
So your recommendation is to amend these?
Yes.
Can we give it a little bit more specific to the amendment? The possibility of including a counselor on the committee, but not bringing stuff back to council for review, but that a counselor joins the committee for projects, but then steps away when there isn't a project. That, I don't know, I'm just, does that make sense?
No, that's a fair comment, but those types of specifics
Okay.
will certainly be entertained, but first of all, we have to decide whether or not anybody wants to update them
Okay,
at all.
Right.
Correct?
The terms of
Question?
reference. So to be clear, the terms of reference of the 3 committees that we've seen so far for the 2 are not standardized. And clearly going through, as we go through this review process, we'll be finding ways to template these so that there's minimum provisions in a terms of reference that can be customized for the particular purposes of the committee or potentially removed. At this point, so we can do that, or we can just amend what we currently have at an upcoming council meeting really soon.
Councillor Utcher?
could it be develop a terms of reference rather than amend?
Yes.
Because
Yep.
this clear, like I'm just scrolling through it now, it's not terms of reference, it's a policy. So,
Sure, develop would be fine.
develop.
So everyone's clear on the next question is develop terms of reference? Is it standardized terms of reference or just terms of reference?
So, thank you, Mayor Christie. I think we should say develop terms of reference, standalone terms of reference, we could call them, that provide in some way for Councillor Hoekstra's concerns.
Very good. So council, we have an indication on willingness to entertain that item now, please. I would say that is a yes.
That was to do for the threshold, right?
That's a portion of it, yes.
All right, so we'll move on to Rikabitsu Society now. I just have to scroll to the place. So this is reviewing our first external agency. In this case, it's a society. It's in good standing with the Societies Act of Alberta. The society is in its 30th year, and its purpose is to steer the city's twinning relationship with Rikabitsu Japan, which was formed in the late 1980s. More information on the background and history is included in the report, page 3. So just going to the chart for Agency 1, the type is external agency. The operational reference docs are listed there for you, documents. Includes a current AGM, the corporate registration, certificate of corporation, and grant applications early on. The monthly city operating grant for this agency is $6,375. It's been about the same for many years. In-kind city contributions have changed over time. Currently, we are providing them with elected official speakers at their functions, delegation gift packages, and communications and marketing promotions to some degree. Reserve balance is none. Minutes submission required, yes. Appointment term 1 year. Alternate council appointee, none. The meeting frequency varies with this, so the demand on the councillor is varied. A minimum of 2 meetings, typically 5 to 7 annually, depending on what they're doing. And it's generally about 2 hours. But again, I think there's a wide variety depending on their activities. City administrative support specifically to this society is none. The managerial liaison has been the manager of community economic development to this point. Mandate overlap with other committees is none. Council remuneration and cost to council members also not applicable except for cost to council members travel or hosting events if participating. Current council member appointee is Councillor Cora Hoekstra as a voting member. And the membership of the society, I guess the executive is listed here. It's Maureen McQueston, Chair, Cora Hoekstra, Council Representative and Vice President, Linda Henderson, Andrea Collins, Patrick Osland, Jennifer Medeas, and Ali Parker. The services area is culture and economic development and tourism, depending on your point of view. And the IAP2 spectrum for this is empowered. And by that, we mean that the grant that goes to the society from the city is expended by them without reference to council. So the agency-city relationship is listed there for you. I've just basically outlined them. These are details of the council appointment, fiscal and in-kind support currently contributed, including administrative support. And essentially our council has no ability to amend the society itself, although it could amend its budget, appointment, and administrative or in-kind support. And of course, we could also terminate the twinning agreement and therefore remove the mandate entirely. Note should be made that currently and historically, elected officials have been very active in the society and its activities on an informal basis, as well as in addition to the formal council appointment. Agency input, again, pulling inputs from the aggregated results that we had, we could see that some of it was quite applicable to this agency. In this case of note was that 36 of all respondents in the survey said that city supports could be better. And that is aside from budget. We're talking about in-kind supports. And again, in terms of IAP2, this committee is public consultation on the empowered end of the spectrum, which means the group is able to use its money without reference to council. So the city agency amendments, and I'll just scroll to that part of the report. The options for that. We could increase administrative support and managerial liaison. This is recommended. We could recognize the society as a municipal service provider and align with them more closely through the city hosting a webpage dedicated to the Rickabitzoo Society, the twinning agreement, and their activities on our city's website. It's a low-cost opportunity to support them. There's some comparable examples from one of our comparators, the town of Stony Plain. They have quite a well-developed program for their twinning relationship. And I also thought that in addition, some additional managerial liaisons, so from the recreation and culture manager, for example, to develop in some respects the cultural aspects of the society's activities in Macomb, more so than they have been done. And then, of course, increasing the administrative support with the website would include more back and forth to get updated information and task the IT department with uploading material. Option number 2 is cease appointing a formal council or voting member to the society. This is recommended because, again, the society is self-sustaining and in addition council, elected official participation in the society's activities is quite well fleshed out. And option 3 is, of course, the option to terminate the twinning agreement and focus on alternate cultural, economic, or tourism initiatives. However, that would be not supported by some of council's strategic goals, which are itemized. And those are our 3 options.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra, you are a representative on that society currently. Would you care to start?
Yes. So thank you, first of all. I really do like the itemized list. Like once new councillors come on board and they can see this list that, yes, we are only supposed to have a 1-year term, just throwing that out there. And we're supposed to submit minutes. Like I really, really appreciate that piece. But back to your amendments, suggested amendments. I support for sure the administrative support. We did not increasing that. We didn't know we were working with Guy, so this is very helpful to help. Cease appointing a councillor to the society. Yes, I understand that recommendation, but then this society would not have any voice, I don't think, in our community. I don't know if Councillor Hibbs wants to help me out here at all, but bringing it forward to council, talking to people, that concerns me, even though that would have been my recommendation number 2. Number 3, terminate the twinning agreement. I actually, it says not recommended, but I was hoping out of this review that somehow we could task city administration to figure out whether we should be terminating that agreement, because I think my notice of motion said gauge future commitment to this endeavor. And in these amendments, I don't see a strategy to gauge whether our city still wants to be part of a twinning agreement. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what I think the society is asking. Of course, the society would like to continue, but they've all been on it a long time, and they're not really seeing a lot of new people, and they certainly don't see a lot of community members going on the trip. So how can we survey our community and ask them whether we want to do this going forward? That would be my suggested amendment here. Am I correct, Councillor Hibbs, that if we weren't there, well, Councillor Connick, you were a much loved member of this society too, like, and you're integral to the visit with the bus and everything. So I would like to hear from someone else too. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Hibbs?
I guess, yeah, I'd like to weigh in, I guess. As far as the recommendations, I would probably agree with them, the increased administrative support. If they are tasked to do something, of what they're doing, I think they do need additional support. A formal councillor being part of the society, I actually do support the recommendation as to not. I obviously want to make it really clear that that's not saying that it's not an important, committee, and that shouldn't be taken by the society as saying you're not worth it, you're not important. It's just, I don't think that a formal position of a councillor on that committee or the society is required. I certainly would, love to be involved just as a community member. I'm sure other people that have been involved that have enjoyed their time as well. But they're just different things. But I also definitely support what Councillor Hoekstra said about, is this something that is even what we want to continue with? And I would like to gauge somehow community support for that, because honestly, this is a little thing that just sort of flies under the radar, and it's really enjoyable for a small group of people. It hasn't really changed in I don't know how long. And so I really do think that does need eyes on it. And is this something that we need to continue? Again, not saying that it's not, a fantastic group of people and that, it's a great opportunity, but is it serving our community at large? I guess is the question I really want answered. So that's what I would say for my feedback.
Thank you. I too have served on this society. Very much enjoyed my time there, enjoyed the trip to Japan. My wife and I were fortunate enough to go 2 trips ago, I guess it would have been, which is quite some time. We do. Our community and the city of Rukavitsu, or town of Rukavitsu, see this relationship, I would suggest, somewhat differently. For them, it's very much a rite of passage for all of their grade 8 students. I think that everyone, or virtually everyone, does in fact make the trek over here. And we certainly always seem to accommodate them well, and they enjoy themselves, and quite often receive back not only gifts, but books and pamphlets of how much they enjoyed their trip and whatnot. I think it's an interesting thing for our community to try and place a value on this, because, myself, I initially thought that this twinning was basically intended to spearhead some sort of an economic relationship or whatnot. And I would suggest in however many years it's been now, that has not really been the case. That is not to say that the relationship is not valuable, much like art. It's kind of invaluable, older, and I know I gained a lot of insight touring throughout the country for what we were able to, and whatnot. So I think there's value in it. I don't believe that council should put an end to this twinning relationship. I think that we owe it to this group, because of the long-standing history in our community, to give them all of the support that the administrative support that we can, to enable them to foster the interest and whatnot. I think in the past they have struggled with some of the administrative work and the communications and advertising aspect, because they do add value to our community, whether it be organizing a few events at the home days, the educational aspect for our youth. I mean, this is all valuable stuff. But I think if you asked most residents, they would not know that the majority of those events take place, nor would they know of the existence of the Rukavitsu Friendship Society, which is unfortunate. I'm sure there's lots of very perfectly good reasons for that, but I think that we need to give them some of the tools to be successful. And in saying that, I do not necessarily see the need of having a counselor appointed to this society, provided there is an increased level of service administratively. Councillor Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. And then as an added thing that has happened in the last few years too, this society relies on a lot of support from the school system. And so teachers potentially promoting it to their students to travel. But what is happening now is the Wolf Creek School Division has committed themselves to have an exchange with China. So I feel that has changed the opportunity in our community too for, so where should kids go? Where should they travel to? And where are they going to be supported the greatest? And I feel like the school system is saying now it's going to be with China, even though we don't know what the future holds in that regard. But I think that is something that is present now, and our committee has felt that, when they tried to get some uptake with some of their activities at school with writing essays or whatnot, there isn't the buy-in, and that's no criticism intended of the school. I just think it's just a split away from commitment to Japan and now maybe towards China. So that's why I really feel strongly that there has to be some kind of tool or some kind of process to gauge whether we should continue.
Councillor Connacht.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I support the recommendations that are laid out here. I think they need more help. I think it would certainly help them in carrying out their tasks. I would agree that they don't need council representation. I don't think that's necessary for them and for that society to continue moving forward. And I would agree that we shouldn't toss away a 30-year relationship because we're not entirely sure of the benefits. Again, I think you said, I think you'd ask the general public, they really don't know what they do or what they're about, or so maybe that's just an education piece. Having said all that, I mean, if you look at the membership that's there, I mean, if 3 key people leave, that's basically all the history of that organization is gone, and it may just come to pass that just ends on its own. Like if Marlene, Linda, and Andrea aren't a part of it anymore, then it may just end on its own. I mean, like you say, it's Tyler Rakowitz takes this very seriously. It's a huge deal for not so much for us, but so I would just be careful suggesting all that. It's just that we should terminate it. We should try to have it grow in, try to get more volunteers, and if at the end of the day that just doesn't happen, that may happen on its own anyways. Not just something that just fall on its own. Right here, right now, I don't think that's the decision we should.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Just to clarify, thanks, Mayor Creasy, I'm not suggesting that we terminate it. I am suggesting we gauge public interest, but I'm also very hopeful with this administrative support. If we can get presence on the website or some, more professional, some buzz, yes. And then maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised what comes out of this. And again, we're dealing with timing, and it's really unfortunate because none of this is going to happen for a while. The Japanese group is not, the Rikibitsu group is not coming to Canada this year, so that's going to be the first time in 29 years and 30 years. So that's, like Council Koenig says, maybe some of this will evolve on its own.
Thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Question for you, Councillor or Councillor Hoekstra. How many people went last year from Macomb? 6?
4 adults, 2 students.
Yeah. So, and coming back, we had like 30, is that right?
Yeah.
So I mean, and the 6 going, is that a representation of the last number of years? Kind of numbers?
So so we're not misleading people, as I said, this is viewed substantially different for the 2 communities. Our contingent from the Macomb here is kind of on an ad hoc basis, and it varies. And it's not a given, it's an annual thing by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe every 5 would probably be a better average thereabouts. Whereas as a rite of passage for every single grade A student in that community, each and every year make the trek over here. So when this agreement was first struck under Mayor Charles Budd some 30 years ago, I think our communities were very similar in size, maybe, I don't know, 4,500, 5,000, if memory serves me correctly. Since that time, obviously, we're now a city and have approximately 15,000 people, substantially larger. And Rakowitz has shrunk to a population of about 2,500 or thereabouts. So a very different situation. And in saying that, the community of half the size that it was then still sees fit to send each and every one of its students over here. As far as how it's funded and whatnot, I honestly could not say, but they do send them each and every year at the graduating 8th grade A class. So it's a pretty important relationship for them. As far as who gains what out of it, I think is open to interpretation from everyone, but I think there are lots of wins on both sides. That's Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. And to add to that, because Lacombe only sends a delegation, well, sends has a delegation every few years. We don't have a really large base of people that are supporting the efforts of the society. So when we have an annual visit of, 25 people, we've got, they're all billeted into homes. And I know that it's very, it's a lot of work for one particular society member who, she find billets for all the people who are visiting here. So that's part of where this challenge comes out of. They're saying, we need more help. We need more help to host the Rikabitsu students. Once they're here, when all those details are in place, super fun. It is, I've been part of the wrap up typically, but the joy that they receive with being here and the families really enjoy it. It is very, very worth it at that point. But it's just that effort of trying to get families in our community excited about this. So.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Casey. Yeah, I totally agree that it's a lot of fun. We hosted a number of years ago when our kids were still at home. And I think the value, that is where the value is for our community, is when they come and the experience you get from having them in our community, those number of days. And I think for our investment in time and dollars, it's well worth it. Even if we don't send anybody ever over there, what we get in return, it certainly is worth it to me for our community and certainly our kids, especially to interact with them.
I'm not seeing a bunch of other hands. Director Duke, if you care to go through the points, let's do something else.
Good. We have 3, and I could potentially add a survey of public input to that, so if we make that 4. So the first one we have is increase the event support as outlined in the report. Number 2 is cease appointing a formal counselor to the society.
Sorry.
I suppose terminate the twinning agreement is a definite no. And then
So prior to going into item number 4, which is fine, bit of an interesting situation. As much as I value public input, I'm just wondering if this is the appropriate time to do that, given that I think you're going to find there's a very limited number of people who are familiar with what this society does. I'm just wondering what the value will be, and are we directing administration, are we setting up for failure to get information that's of little use for people that, I mean,
That's true.
I'm just not sure that we're going to necessarily glean the value out of this at this time. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, just at this particular time.
So
Dr. Duke?
we could add an alternate number 4 is to continue researching the twinning agreement and determine its parameters. I haven't located a copy of it, for example. Continue to do that and then put off public consultation to another date, later date, when we have more information.
Certainly, and if we're unable to find one here, I know that the Japanese Consul General in Calgary will certainly have a copy of it. Does that satisfy the similar type of question, Councillor Hoekstra, or would you prefer the other one still go through?
No, I think that your comments are they're excellent, they're bang on, because if we ask people about something they don't know about, they're gonna say they don't value it, and then you're so right. And I guess maybe it is, gauge how much we value it. And if we value it, then we actually have to step up and help this group, because they need help in the fall and not this fall, but going forward. But I think our administrative support will also they will get a sense of how much need this group has, or what the needs are. So anyhow, I know I'm all over the place with this one. I really, really like being part of the group, but they need support.
With respect to the reformatted last question, do you want to go ahead with that one then, Director Duke?
We could try promoting or working with the recommendations for amending it for a year, or even 18 months, and then return the matter to council with more information. Do that.
Myself, I think it bare minimum of a year, possibly two, and given this situation right now, I think a couple might be, I know that kind of kicks it down the road to a potentially new group, but yeah, I just don't see that the questions being asked are going to be fruitful for it, right? Councilor Connor, go ahead.
So just to this whole process, so we're doing a review of those committees. We're not suggesting we drop council membership here and now. It's just a review. It comes back to council. We finish off our terms prior to the next election. Is that what I'm getting here? Or?
So we'll be bringing back following this committee meeting at a soon to come council meeting. We'll bring these actual recommendations for decision. And we'll look at each individual committee or agency and determine what might make sense there, a logical conclusion to council's representation on the board.
And also then, so this is labeled as report number 1. How many of these such reports are we doing? Because there's basically usually 3 per report. How many are you anticipating that we do?
Did you say 7 or 8? 8. There are 25 boards, committees and commissions that councillors are appointed to.
The reason I asked that question is that, yes, this is not a week or two thing. This is a substantial undertaking. So just to get through the first round, perhaps it'll be concurrently with second recommendations and others. That's fine, but this is going to take a while. Is that a fair estimate, Chief Gowdy? So you've got all the indications that you require then, or?
Could we have a thumbs up, thumbs down that last one?
Sure, go for it. Go for it. You go ahead and better reread it.
Go ahead and reread it. Implement the other.
I had promoting or working with recommendations or amending it for a year, 18 months, and return matter to council for more information.
Okay, does anybody have let's narrow that down. Is 18 months okay with everyone? That's what I'm thinking. But let's change that. Let's update that to 18 months minimum to leave it a little more open. I don't think a year's enough. And perhaps you could just read that back one more time, Ross, please.
So promoting or working with recommendations or amending it for a year, 18 months minimum, and return the matter to council for more information. Prior to that, we also discussed continue researching twinning agreement and determining its parameters. I don't know if that was still in or not.
So just to be clear, that does not preclude any of the other recommendations as far as involvement and changing that. Is that very clear on that? Okay. So councillors, wishes? Thumbs up, thumbs down? I would say that is enough.
Very good.
Thank you for your time, Director Duke. We appreciate it. So as far as the televised or YouTube portion of the meeting, I believe that concludes things. We do have some in-camera items for council discussions as well. So if we could just have one of the few motions that we are entitled to make at a meeting such as this. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Also moving into in camera.
Camera at 6:45. Very good. All those in favor? Thank you very much. I'll ask that the camera be shut down. We will take a 5-minute recess and then we will resume with our in-camera items.